talking to Harvinder and Mital, the co-founding members of Team Pre-Reg, about what they provide to pharmacy students on overcoming the difficulties associated with the pre-registration examination. I suppose the first question is, what does Team Pre-Reg actually do, specifically for pharmacy students?
So what we do is we provide support to pharmacy students that are sitting their pre-registration exam. Throughout the year we are sort of providing one-to-one feedback with a buddy scheme, so that students are paired with one of us and they sort of email us questions and they're in contact with us on a regular basis with any queries that they might have. So anything that they can't get from their tutors, or if they don't always see their tutors or they want more, we're able to provide that with the buddy scheme. We also provide a weekly calculations club where we send out calculations on a regular basis that we write in preparation for the exam, and then feedback with answers a week later. On top of that, we have a Facebook group where we allow students, a community of students that have joined us on the calculations group, to answer these questions and discuss with each other, where we will interject and offer support and advice with step-by-step methods as well. In addition to that, we've also produced a number of resources to prepare the students for the examination with regards to the syllabus and practice questions, which we also release on a regular basis. And also we build revision timetables tailoring to the students' needs of how much time they have, what their weaknesses and strengths are, and how they can sort of allocate their time effectively before the exam to prepare for it in the right way.
Providing resources to the students. We were one of those students a couple of years back, so it's everything that we wish we had, and we're providing that to students, so it's just bridging the gap for them between their training provider and obviously us.
The way that Team Pre-Reg works is based largely on your own experiences as pre-reg students. What's the most common complaint that pre-reg students come to you with? What are the big common difficulties?
Well, their expectation of the exam, so they don't actually understand what could be asked, what can't be asked, things like that. And the other thing is the training available, the time that they've got to, planning their revision type of thing.
Yeah, especially with this year's exam, there's a lot of uncertainty as to what would come up, especially with the exam format changing and tweaks with the syllabus that the GPHC have done. There's a lot of uncertainty across all training providers as to what's going to come up, and we're there to provide that additional support alongside their training providers to sort of guide them in the right direction to do that, and that's probably what they find most helpful.
What's your advice to students on overcoming, just a general advice on overcoming the difficulties associated with the pre-reg exam?
So my first advice would be to start early, to start not only revising but learning the material early and going back to your university material, especially the clinical cases and clinical knowledge, and making sure you know that inside out and understand it, not just memorise it but understand it, because the format of the exam, as we believe, is going to be a lot more based on the clinical knowledge and applying that clinical knowledge, and not just recalling facts but being able to apply it to real life situations. So the biggest advice that I would give is make sure you know your clinical knowledge inside out, and then move on to the other bits that would come up.
You talk about the sort of the clinical side of the clinical knowledge. Do you think the pre-reg exam as it is now, it lacks that kind of hands-on practical skills testing, and it's too theory-based?
I think what the GPHC have done with making it a lot more clinical is probably a good thing, because previously it was tested, but on equal par with other areas. And what they've managed to do is make sure that the pharmacists that are qualifying have that sound knowledge that they need. So that's a step in the right direction. But with regards to the exam a little bit more, it could reflect all areas of pharmacy practice as opposed to so I know as opposed to just one of them. So I know a few years ago it was very sort of community based and minor conditions being presented in the pharmacy. And even before this exam, a few years ago, they started to manoeuvre it into sort of more clinical, hospital based. So I remember certainly when I did my exam, I found that compared to the practice papers, there was a lot more clinical sort of hospital based scenarios in there. And what they've done now is they've made it even more clinical based, which is good, because that needs to be tested. But I think other areas still need to be tested, still need to be examined. So there are other areas of pharmacy that could be examined in the exam, which should be done, because not all pharmacists go into sort of community and hospital. There are other aspects,
Right.
such as industry and sort of the legal side to it as well. So I think if the exam covers everything, it would ensure that everyone that does qualify has a sound knowledge of all areas.
Do you feel that the exam as it is then, based on what you've just said, it's quite restricted, it's quite, it could be expand a lot more than what in its current forms?
It could be expanded to cover the other areas, but at the moment they've moved into the right direction for patient safety, which is probably the biggest, most important factor that they need to consider when someone is going to register as a pharmacist.
Yes.
But again, they could sort of, in the future, to improve it even more, make sure they've covered all bases.
Yeah, that's a big improvement, I suppose, for the GPHC to
Yeah.
potentially make in the coming months or years. I mean, what other aspects do you think the GPHC could improve the experience for students on the pre-reg exam?
So you were saying practical,
Yeah.
that it's not covering a lot of practical elements of being a pharmacist, and it's a lot very theory-based.
Yes.
So that's another way that they could look at it in the future, maybe having sort of OSCE-style exams that they have for other professions in the medical profession, and also in other countries pharmacists have to sit OSCE-style examinations to register. That is something that the GPHC could look at, looking at the actual communication skills of that pharmacist and how they are working under pressure when they're faced with a certain customer and how they act within that situation. That's probably my biggest suggestion, to be honest, to test the practical communication side of that person, because at the moment, although they're testing the theory very well, they're not really testing how well that pharmacist is communicating, especially in hospital and community pharmacy. Communication skills are a big aspect of the job that a pharmacist needs to have, and if it's not being tested at the registration point and you're relying on the universities to test it in their final exams, it's not really at a standardised level, which every other aspect of testing is at.
Right.
I would just say a lot more feedback would benefit the students, a little bit around maybe the exam that's just been sat, or whenever they've sat the exam, just some topics around what their student could focus on, so they can kind of target their revision a lot, not completely, but they know which direction to kind of target their revision in. So I would just say a bit more feedback on things like that. I
mean, these are fantastic suggestions, and this is no doubt the way forward for the pre-reg exam. Are you confident, optimistic that the GPHC will move in this direction with the exam?
I think they're going towards it anyway, yeah.
I think if there's enough people sort of voicing for these improvements, then I think they will start looking into it. At the moment, they've just changed the exam, so they're going to probably give it a couple of years before they act again. But if we start sort of sort of voicing our concerns about the next steps to improve it even further and changing it for the changing way that pharmacy is heading in terms of the way the career is heading, then maybe they can look at that in the future.
Yes. Are you actively approaching the GPHC with your ideas, and or do you intend to do that?
I think at the moment, because the first exam is the summer one, after the change in syllabus, I think after seeing what happens there, seeing the feedback of students, then obviously we can take it from there. Right now, no one kind of knows, apart from the GPHC themselves, what's going to be in the exam and what way they're going to kind of verge in the exam. Right. So after that, we can look to approaching them then and just gain the feedback of students and then doing it that way. I think. Our aim now is just to prepare the students as best as possible, so they're in the best position to sit that exam and obviously enter the register. To be honest.
Thanks very much, guys. Yes, thanks for coming in.